of how our parents met. And so I heard the story, or so I thought. So, the bedtime story of my mom telling me how she and my dad met. It was in Moscow, it was cold, it was the 70s, and it was the communist times. And the Jews were not allowed to do any kind of religious ceremonies. But one day a year, they were allowed to celebrate. They would go to the synagogue, the big synagogue in Moscow, and they would dance. And this was great, not because it was religious, not because it was important, but she could hook up with guys. So this is the way Russians tell stories. It's always sex and alcohol. So, and I was in 6, 7. So she went to the synagogue and they started dancing. I don't know if you've seen it like in films. They dance in circles and go and crazy. And this handsome young man approaches her and they dance together and he takes her phone number and she goes home and she waits to see if he'll call. Again, 40 years ago, same story probably here in New York. Boy meets girl, girl waits for phone call. So she waits for the phone call. And the next day he calls. I guess they didn't have to wait for 3 days in Moscow. So the next day he calls her out. And she's really excited. And she dresses up, and they meet at this point where they decide to meet, and they have a date, and then 8 months later, they get married, and she's like, Ilana, I think he hypnotized me. How else can you explain I got married in 8 months and I was 18? So I don't know, you're crazy. Anyway, so they got married, and that was the story, I grew up on. I thought it was very romantic. So we go forward about 20 years later. I go to France because my dad works there. He's a mathematician. All the stereotypes about Russians, yes, he's a mathematician, and yes, we drink. And so I go and visit, and we have this month where I live in Paris with him. So I go tour the city during the day. He goes and does his math, blah, blah. And in the evening, we sit down and we have dinner together. Okay, so of course we open a bottle of vodka. Sometimes it's wine because we're in France. And we sit down and we talk. And it's like the first time ever that we are alone for a month together. And so he decided to tell me how cool he was when he was young and how many girls he dated in different ages and varieties. I'm like, Dad, I'm not your buddy. We're drinking, but I'm still your daughter. Doesn't stop him. And one evening, he says, well, do you know how I met your mother? I said, well, I thought I knew, but now I'm getting a bit worried. Maybe it's not as romantic, and maybe I don't want to know. He's like, oh, it doesn't matter. I'm going to tell you. I said, okay, thanks, Dad. So we sit down, and he started and said, so it was synagogue, and blah, 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 Simchat Torah, the holiday we dance because we got the Bible from God. You don't care about that, right? I was like, right. So I'll get to the point. So what we did is we knew that that was the easiest place to get girls because they all wanted to meet a nice Jewish boy, and I was a nice Jewish boy. So every year we'd wait for that day, and that was easy score. So we went there. But our friends wanted to spice things up. So what we did is we tried to hit on as many girls as we could. We took their phone numbers, and later we all shuffled it in a little hat, and each of us took one phone number from the hat. And so I did that. I hit on as many girls as I could. I'm, a team player, and that's what we decided to do. And we got to our point of meeting, and we took out the numbers, and I got a number. And I was worried about two things. A, would she be good looking? B, what if she doesn't recognize me because I was not the one hitting on her? So I was adventurous, as you know, and I went. I called this girl up, still had no idea, went to the meeting point, and I looked up. She was standing on the stairs. She was very pretty. I don't know if I hit on her or not. She recognized me, then I understood I did hit on her. We went on the date, and I fell in love, and when you fall in love, you don't need to fool around anymore. And that's how I met your mother. I still don't know which version I like more, which is more romantic, but I know one thing, it's still a secret. My mom still doesn't know, so please don't tell her.